While I thought this was going to be a light week in terms of Steam Deck news, Valve has ratcheted things up. Let's get right into it. What's good, Deck Gang? Guess what? We are now closer to the launch month than we were when the Steam Deck was initially delayed. I had a whole script I was getting ready to record and edit about some more reassuring news when Valve themselves put out a blog post. So let's start with that because it's a doozy. It reads, quote, "Happy New Year. The team is back from holiday and firing on all cylinders. We've got a few updates for you today. First and foremost, we're on track to ship Steam Deck on time. Global pandemic, supply issues, and shipping issues notwithstanding, it looks like we'll be able to start getting these out the door by the end of February. You can view your estimated reservation ability window here in case you've forgotten." Of course, they provide a link to that, and they go on to say, "In parallel, work and testing for the Steam Deck Verified program has been underway. You'll soon be able to see Deck Verified status for a growing set of Steam games. We're checking 4 major categories: input, seamlessness, display, and system support. You can learn more about the program here. It's also important that we give developers the ability to test their games in order to get that nice green verified check. So we've been sending developer kits out in quantity. We've been approving another wave of dev kits, and hundreds have been shipped out in the last month, and we're continuing to approve and send out even more. Thanks for your patience, devs. But what good are words when we have photos? Our production build is ramping up, and we have some first units in-house to test and evaluate. They're looking great." End quote. So Valve covers 3 major pieces of news. Number 1, they are on track for February. They say they'll start shipping at the end of February. That implies we won't get ours till March. Number 2, they're working on the Deck Verified program. I'm going to talk about that at length in this video, so I'll just leave it at that for now. And finally, number 3, they've sent out hundreds of new dev kits. This is another thing I cover in this video, so that's great news. They leave us with pictures of production units. That's right, Deck Gang. Production units. Production units. Hold on to your butts. This launch is happening. What's funny is that the script I prepared covers all 3 of these points, being on track for February, the Deck Verified program, and a new wave of dev kits. So I'm going to leave the rest of this video pretty much as is, so you can kind of see the parts of the puzzle that Valve has been putting together this week. Let's start with Deck Verified. Back in mid-October, Valve announced their Deck Verified program. If you recall, there are 4 possible categories: verified, playable, unsupported, and unknown. In order to get Deck Verified, you need to cover your bases in 3 categories: input, display, and seamlessness. For input, you have to have full controller support as well as appropriate controller icons, and have an on-screen keyboard pop up whenever the player needs to enter text. For display, you need to support 720p or 800p and have a playable performance. Also, your text must be legible. With regard to seamlessness, your game must have no compatibility warnings, and if your game has a launcher, it must be navigable with a control pad. I started using these criteria when I test games for Linux compatibility, and more recently I started asking several developers what they can tell me about the Deck Verified process. Have they submitted? Where are they in the queue? Most devs have rightfully ignored my questions. Some have told me that they don't even know how to submit their game for review. That part surprised me, and I began to worry that the Deck Verified process wasn't ironed out enough yet. Well, just this week, I was pleased to find out that one Steam game updated their compatibility information, and we now know what that first Deck Verified game is. It should come as very little surprise, of course, that I'm talking about Portal 2. As I've mentioned in several videos now, most notably my last one, Portal 2 has been absolutely key in Steam Deck marketing and even in the marketing of Valve Index before that. Portal 2 is a beloved game, not just by fans, but beloved by Valve themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if Shell is the first word they enter into Wordle every day they play. And you know they're playing Wordle. Are you playing Wordle? You should be playing Wordle. Anyway, it's great to see that come full circle with Portal 2 being the first game to be Deck Verified. So how did we learn of this news? Did Valve make some big announcement? Did we get a press release giving us this exciting Deck news? No, of course not. That wouldn't be very Valve-like now, would it? Instead, this was first reported by WickedPlayer494 on Twitter, who often covers Steam and Valve-related updates. Editor's note, we now know that Valve later gave a blog post, but they didn't include Portal 2 being Deck Verified in that update. Back to WickedPlayer494 and his tweet. In his tweet, he says, "The first Steam game to have its evaluation for Steam Deck compatibility published is Portal 2, which passes with flying colors. Results aren't yet visible on the Steam store, but they can be viewed under the Steam Deck compatibility app info field. If we take a look at this change list on SteamDB, here's what we see. First is category, with a value of 3. Assuming that this starts with an index of 0, it seems safe to say that category is the actual deck verified status, with 0 being unknown, 1 being unsupported, 2 being playable, and 3 being verified. Then we have the version number of the build that was tested and when this test was last run. Finally, we have a status for each series of tests run against this game. So we see that the default controller config is fully functional. The controller glyphs match the device, the interface text is legible, and finally the default configuration is performant. We still don't know what is the floor for a game to be, quote, performant, but we know that Portal 2 can be played at 60 FPS on the Steam Deck with no issues. The only tests missing here are ones that would be non-applicable to Portal 2, like dealing with launchers or on-screen keyboards. To that end, SteamDB has been updated to reflect this new data element. Steam Deck has been added to the list of supported systems. And on the Portal 2 page, you can see the deck icon followed by the check icon for verified. You can also use the filter on the instant search page to refine your search to things that are deck verified. Of course, the result is only Portal 2 for now. Pavel Jundik also said that they'll figure out new places to surface this information as more apps get updated with their compatibility information. All in all, this is really big news, especially for me as someone who is beginning to worry about deck verified specifically. I hope this opens the floodgates for deck verified news, but trying to predict what Valve will do is a lot like trying to predict when I'm going to ask you to hit the like button. You can't do it, so hit the like button, and if you want more Steam Deck videos, then click subscribe and slap the bell. Speaking of my videos and deck verified, I've really been wanting to start doing videos on how some games would fare in the deck verified process, and I think now is a good time to start. We have the first deck verified game. We have some good Monster Hunter Rise and God of War impressions, and this is only the beginning as this first quarter appears to be huge for game releases. So comment down below if you'd be interested in this sort of video, and whether you want me to start with Monster Hunter Rise or God of War, or both. With that, let's discuss some huge news about Monster Hunter Rise. This news is arguably bigger than Portal 2 being deck verified. Earlier this week, Pierre-Luc Griffet tweeted that Monster Hunter Rise works great on Proton on launch day. As a reminder, Pierre-Luc is on the Steam Deck team and specifically works on Proton. In his tweet, he also said that Capcom provided the Proton development team early access to this title. This is why I say this is really huge news. This addresses one of my biggest concerns with Proton as it stands today. Today, many AAA games launch in an incompatible state. I've already given many recent examples like Forza Horizon 5. This marks the first time we've heard of a large AAA company like Capcom working with the Proton team ahead of time. It's always been possible to do. For example, this effort is similar to how AAA companies will work with Nvidia and AMD to prepare day one drivers for their games. But despite being possible, there hasn't really been the impetus to work proactively. The fact that Capcom does see benefit in this is huge. It's more clear support for the Steam Deck. This ensured that Monster Hunter Rise would have launched with at least a deck playable status. It's going to be fascinating to see what other studios work with the Proton team in the coming months. On the subject of how games perform on deck, we actually have some footage of Forza Horizon 5 running on deck. In last week's video, I mentioned a streamer named ASMR Destiny who shared a picture of a Steam Deck on his Twitter. There was speculation as to whether he had a review unit, but I offered some reasonable doubt to that theory. After I published my video, I went ahead and watched his streams, and to my surprise, he already shared footage of the Steam Deck in question. He said that he worked for Microsoft and got the Steam Deck that way. Now, I haven't done any fact checking on this, so I'm just going to take him at his word. That said, on his stream, ASMR Destiny showed gameplay of Forza running on Steam Deck, which is something that Microsoft themselves haven't shown yet. This might be why he later took the video down, but I'm nothing if not resourceful, so I already had a copy of the video downloaded, and that's what you're seeing here. In addition to Forza, ASMR Destiny showed off a bit more of the new Steam Big Picture Mode UI. You could see him navigating from game to game and even into the settings menu. When he first turned it on, it looked like it was coming out of sleep mode and it went straight to Steam BPM. So we never saw it go to the Steam OS or the desktop environment, if you want to be more specific. Additionally, we see that by default there's no security when you first resume play. There might be a login prompt on a cold boot, and given that SteamOS itself is based on Arch Linux, I'm sure we'll have other security options. but this was a nice bit of insight that we rarely get in other footage. Again, ASMR Destiny has taken the VOD of this live stream down, and we're not sure why, but I think he'd rather not be contacted about it. So please let him be and don't reach out to him about the Steam Deck. In the early days of Fan to Deck, well, I guess it was What's on Deck back then. In the early days of my channel, devs getting dev kits was huge news. I slowed down on coverage of that, well, partially because it became repetitive, but also the frequency with which new devs were getting dev kits had slowed down a bit. That seems to have taken a turn in the new year. This feels like a brand new wave of dev kits have been sent out. Back in September, I said that most of the people getting dev kits were in the top 1,000 sellers. It seems to me like now we're in the top 5,000 sellers bracket. Some people that recently got dev kits include the creator of the Cook Serve Delicious series, Wired Productions, who made Close to the Sun and The Falconeer, Rami Ishmael, one half of the now defunct Vlambeer, who made awesome games like Nuclear Throne. If we truly are at the point where top 5,000 sellers are able to get dev kits, then once again, that's extremely exciting news. I can't necessarily extrapolate how many dev kits are out there, but I can imagine that Valve has more than doubled the number of dev kits since the early days, and hopefully it means that they are in a good place with regard to final production units. Editor's note, we now know that this recent wave of dev kits was in the hundreds and that we are in fact in a good place with regard to production units. So as I close this video out, here are some final tidbits for you. Slay the Spire has a new build that adds Steam input support specifically for the purpose of better Steam Deck compatibility. On a similar note, the developer of the Falconeer is implementing UI scaling for the Steam Deck. Also, I told you about the Power Slave remaster in a previous video. Well, Stephen Kick, the CEO of Night Dive Studio, let us know via tweet that this game is coming out next month. Don't forget to add that to your wishlist. Finally, since you're already adding stuff to your wishlist, check out Buck Up and Drive. This game obviously has the look of a classic arcade racer, but the mechanics are entirely unique. There is no button for gas or for brake. You can steer and you can drift. Yet thanks to special moves and the way the game ramps up difficulty, there are some really neat layers of complexity to it. The main mode is an arcade score chase. You can pass through speed pads or ramps to go faster. In the air, you can perform tricks or dive bomb on other cars. You can use drift to build up a boost, and you can bump other cars that way too. Damage enough other cars and you'll have to deal with a police vehicle. And more. This game is a blast. If you like arcade games that give you that just one more round feeling, check this out. So what'd you think of this week's news? Valve dropped some key hints with Portal 2 being deck verified, Capcom working closely with Valve, and a brand new wave of dev kits. And then after that series of hints, they dropped a bomb on us that supported all those hints. They are getting ready to ship in late February, and I for one could not be happier. Here's to hoping I can snag a unit early enough to still be a relevant source of information to you all. With that, if you made it this far, you are a real one, and you may have heard this before. Like and subscribe. Slap the bell to get notified. Tell a friend it's a vibe. Deck Gang out. Goodbye.